Everyone, and welcome to the Town of Mahone Bay's regular council meeting. You have an agenda. Welcome to the people at home before we get started. Glad to see you all here. You have an agenda that was emailed out to you. The same email that was posted on our Facebook page, town's website, and at the post office. What is your wish with the agenda? Councillor Carver.
May I add an item to the agenda under new business?
New business, yes.
Thank you.
And what's the item?
An notice of motion.
Notice of motion. Okay. Thank you. Councillor Now.
I'd just like to move the adoption of it as amended.
Moved, seconded by Councillor Bain. We approve the agenda for the meeting as amended. All in favor? Motion's carried. Let's go to the minutes of the last batch of meetings, April 28th, the special meeting.
So moved, accepted as circulated.
Okay, do we have a seconder? Deputy Mayor seconds to accept the minutes for that meeting as presented. All in favor? Motion's carried. Let's go to the regular meeting of April the 30th.
I'll move that they're accepted as circulated.
Okay, moved by Councillor Carver, seconded by Councillor Now. All in favor? Motion's carried. Let's go to the special meeting of May the 5th.
I move that they're accepted as circulated.
Moved by Councillor O'Neill, seconded by Councillor Bain. All in favor? Motion's carried. Let's go to the special meeting of May the 7th, 2020.
I'll move, your worship.
Deputy Mayor moves that they be accepted. Councillor Feeney seconds the motion. All in favor? The motion is carried. Good show. Well, one of the things that has been going on for the last 6 weeks or so, maybe a couple of months in and around Mahone Bay, has been a transportation plan process, survey process, to engage the public and to hear from the public what they feel the issues are with traffic, what the issues have been, what they are now, and what they see them possibly becoming in the future. And tonight we have Emmanuel Nicolescu with us, who is with the engineering firm of CBCL, one of the people who's been involved in the development of the transportation plan that he is now going to present to council. Welcome, Emmanuel.
Thank you. Good evening, Mayor and Councillor and people at home. Can everyone hear me all right?
Yes, I can.
All right. Thank you for this opportunity to run you through and present the work we've done on the transportation plan for Mahone Bay. I'll keep it short this evening. I know you have a busy agenda ahead. We'll just quickly run through the process we followed in developing this plan, the background to the project, an overview of the plan itself, and moving on to next steps and what comes after. The project was brought about through a need for the town to be able to adapt to rapid growth and increasing travel demand and traffic on all modes of travel. We understood that council was looking for a transportation plan that considered some of the recent planning initiatives in the town, particularly revolving around active transportation for reducing greenhouse gas emissions. The process we adopted when developing the plan really involved developing or reviewing in-depth background documentation, the planning context, current initiatives in the town, and fairly exhaustive review of existing conditions in terms of inventory of existing facilities, infrastructures, and needs. Once we developed a relatively good understanding of how things currently were in the town, we prepared a series of consultation events. Consultation number 1 was involved an in-person meeting with local residents that took place on February the 20th at the Mahone Bay Center. We had about 40 people attending the event. And at the same time, we also launched a paper survey and an online survey asking participants a number of questions and really trying to probe how they get around town and what are the main issues or concerns they have surrounding transportation and mobility, and also what the guiding principles should be to developing transportation in the town in the future. The online and paper survey had a combined response of about 72 people. Using this feedback and combined with our review of the existing conditions, we identified some of the main themes and just what really came out in terms of needs. What really stood out was the need for improved active transportation, improved safety, more crosswalks, sidewalks, just improving connectivity for pedestrians and cyclists, improving some of the intersections, and also providing more facilities and more planning around cycling. Consultation number 2 was held from March the 24th for about a month until April the 24th. That's where we presented a number of concepts and what we'd heard in the first consultation. And we asked participants to reply with comments, suggestions, any additional concern they had considering our concepts. This time around, we received 89 email responses, some of them very detailed. So we were quite happy to see that level of engagement in the town. A quick overview of the transportation plan. It starts out with laying out these existing conditions and specifics of what we heard from consultation, then developing the concepts. So typically we review population and demographics, we review land use, a census profile really for the community in terms of the transportation patterns, where do people travel, how they travel, and then we kind of overlay that with our review of the existing infrastructure and utilities. From a transportation perspective, this at a minimum involves looking and delving into the road network, the arterial roads, collectors, reviewing traffic and vehicular count information as available, reviewing most importantly then the right of way of each road, and really trying to understand how the reported needs from the population and stakeholders match or don't match the infrastructure. 3 main observations stood out for us in the review and stakeholder consultation. We do see a trend towards an aging population in place that will have some impacts on the sort of specific mobility and service needs. Typically a focus on safer and more accessible local infrastructure, as well as better connectivity and services to services outside of the town, to regional centers like Bridgewater. We do see that the work commuting patterns are a bit split between travel in the town and travel within a distance to Bridgewater, say, so within in this radius. There is a clear desire and need for a focus on active transportation, as we see in terms of the statement prioritization. Active transportation and public safety really took the main spots. Some of the key problems we've identified, or that were identified, pardon me, speeding on some of the major roads, a perception of poor safety or not sufficiently safe infrastructure for pedestrians and cyclists, the need for more crosswalks, the need for simpler and safer intersections, a real interest in addressing climate change and adapting to climate change, particularly with regards to coastal flooding and sea level rise, concern around potential flooding of the coastline, and sort of the infrastructure and the adaptation measures that can be put in place. Improving circulation around the town, calming traffic through the local streets, and parking and accessibility really stood out. Based on these, the findings from this review of existing conditions and of all of the wonderful input and feedback we received, we developed a number of concepts through how we might address some of these, particularly the safety and the active circulation themes. We've discussed these to some extent with Dylan and his staff, and of course we presented them at consultation number 2. So really tried to propose concepts that improved safety, improved access, provided more parking, and improved active transportation facilities. We kind of grouped them a little bit around road network and intersection improvements as kind of the most important or focal points on controlling and formalizing safety and safety really of interest, and perhaps one of the largest and most visible concept was the Edgewater Street Living Shoreline Trail, which came out of the 2015 coastline erosion and flood mitigation study that CBCL also worked on with the town. Then we focused on really the main intersections as following the principle, the philosophy that while posted speed limits are very good and useful measures to control speeds, they require constant enforcement. Whereas in a lot of cases, geometric design can be more effective at controlling speeds and access. So intersections are the natural places where we can start doing that. Starting with the Main Street and the War Monument intersection, it was reported that the intersection was confusing just through the nature of it, with multiple approaches and channelized turns. It can be a bit strange to get around, and it was reported that access to the War Monument itself was unsafe. Really, there are no immediate crosswalks specifically to the War Monument, and it is not easily experienced. So we produced a concept of what it might look like as a very simplified 3-way stop, actually all-way stop, and with the potential or the option of moving the War Monument slightly to one side or the other of the intersection, just so it's easily accessible and outside of the carriageway. Main Street and the Clearway Street intersection was identified as really perceived as being unsafe, particularly with regards to children's access to school. Again, we conceptually thought of it as a 3-way stop. Main Street really, through its entire length, close to 2 kilometers long, I believe, 1 to 2 kilometers, it's really an uninterrupted straight road, and it does not provide, nor does it control or check speeds in any way. Once you're on it, you can drive pretty much unimpeded until you reach the War Monument intersection. So then the best way we considered to bring a measure of safety to this road was to formalize this intersection as a 3-way stop with pedestrian cyclist crosswalks. Similarly for Main Street and Pleasant Street, and with Faubourg Road, formalizing them as 3-way stops instead of just a free flow on the Main Street approaches with or without a crosswalk. We felt that this would bring the best improvements to both safety, perception of safety, and accessibility for pedestrians and cyclists. One of the major approaches in town from the northeast via Route 3, pardon me, really outside of town, we're talking about much higher speed limits than within the town. So as vehicles come in, there really is no way for them to, or no way to check them or stop them really at the bridge at the town limit. There is a speed limit for the town, but there is no physical or geometric check of their speed. So while bringing in measures to reduce speeds within the town are good, a more effective way would be to start limiting or controlling their speeds right before entering the town. So at Oakland Road, there would be the opportunity, in consultation with the ministry, to introduce an always stop at that location. Now, on the other side of town, at Main Street and Longkill Street, that's a location that's been identified as having some trouble and some difficulty, presenting some difficulty, particularly with regards to the trail crossing. We conceptualized that intersection as a potential roundabout. The roundabout offers some advantages over a simple unsignalized intersection in terms of capacity and permitting multiple approaches safely. It also provides the opportunity or allows for the accommodation of pedestrian and cyclist crossings. If not a roundabout, then a step down from that would be to formalize the trail crossing through signage and potentially flashing lights. We also thought town's land use and identified zoning for some of the residential unserviced lots, I guess on the south end of town, southwest end. And the finding from the coastal erosion and flooding study that long-term Edgewater and really Main Street at the mouth of the cove might be permanently or semi-permanently flooded. While some protection measures were presented and costed, at the really long term, considering just the sea level rise and storm frequencies, the town might have to consider at that time to kind of retreat a little bit from the water's edge. With these two thoughts in mind, we thought, well, the road network currently does not have many redundancies built in. There's Edgewater Street and Main Street. These are the main two axes in town. There is no other alternative should these roads be affected by such flooding or other blockages. Now, looking at potential for a parallel route or a route parallel to Main Street or to primarily to Main Street, that's where the old rail right-of-way, the Bay to Bay trail came up as that's what a right-of-way may look like. So we thought, well, if we'd be conceptualizing an additional road corridor through town that would also provide access to unserviced residential lots, something like that would be it. And so we developed a concept around that, not necessarily recommending that be done, but just something that it'd be there in mind for the really long term as what that may look like. Moving on, also primarily really focusing on the active transportation and safety themes. Out of the erosion and flooding control study, an idea had been presented for a pedestrian bridge, really linking Edgewater Street to where the bandstand is now. That would provide for a pedestrian link between the two, improved access to the comfort center, and also an additional way to experience the town. On Main Street, we looked at the potential for additional sidewalks, both on the north side to the west of Town Hall, as well as east of Pleasant Street. For the cycling network, we reviewed what Bicycle Nova Scotia produced in their cycling plan, with some review of their planned bike route and of the interventions they proposed. Issued from all of that, or coming out of that, came the realization or confirmation that historically the town of Mahone Bay worked quite well with narrow streets because it was primarily really a low vehicular volume, low speeds, and relatively limited opportunity or potential for conflict between the two. So as the town grew and as vehicles really became fully adopted and people started driving increasingly faster, that's where the conflict came in. So while the knee-jerk reaction is to say, well, we need then larger infrastructure, more capacity, more facilities, and we start thinking about, okay, adding lanes or widening a road or providing, formalizing cycling lanes or sidewalks. Another way to look at it is, well, let's go back to what historically worked, which was a low volume, low speed environment where multiple users can share the road at low speed with lower risk of conflict and accidents. So to do that, we bring in a traffic calming measure at several locations. Cherry Lane and Fairmount Streets had been identified through consultation, and I believe through a previous study, as benefiting from being converted to one-way streets, particularly due to their narrow right-of-ways. Similarly for a hedgerow, these are quite narrow streets, 8 to 10 meters wide overall or less. So really, they don't allow for formalization of two-way lanes plus any other kinds of facilities, especially when adjacent or abutting residents park on street. So at these locations, Orchard Street, Cherry Lane, Fairmount, these are places that may benefit from traffic calming. Kinburn Street and Claremont Street was identified through the Bicycle Nova Scotia study as a good main cycling route, and certain new striping road striping was presented and proposed for that road. There also, we feel that some traffic calming measures outlined in the report would be beneficial. With regards to public transit, that is certainly a theme that's come up in the consultation. We are quite aware of Citizens for Public Transit, with whom we worked closely last year on a transit feasibility study for Lunenburg County. I understand they've already made a presentation to this council about potential transit routes through primarily linking the areas around Mahone Bay, Lunenburg, and Bridgewater. Additional to these concepts, control of goods movement, loading, on-street and off-street parking really came into quite visible through the comments. So we developed some concepts around really controlling through a curbside management plan where and when loading may occur, particularly for businesses, where parking may be allowed, and what the opportunities for off-street parking lots may be. Now, with all of these, of course, enforcement would be needed. Lastly, we looked at some low-hanging fruits in terms of additional crosswalks. These would be mid-block crosswalks away from intersections, and at several locations really would benefit from these crosswalks, improving accessibility and safety of connections between activity centers and really focal points and parking lots or sidewalks. At the same time, crosswalks offer, if they're signed and flashing, offer the opportunity to check vehicle speeds again through the corridor. So we presented all of these options and really just concepts to the public during consultation number 2. The 89 emails we received were very useful in their detail and just confirming or providing explanation of what residents and stakeholders liked or didn't agree with so much. Really, two major concepts came up as quite unpopular. Specifically that second boulevard or additional link that we showed through the rail to trail corridor, as well as the 2 off-street parking lots we investigated, one of them being behind the school and cemetery, and one unfortunately right over the pond garden. That was quite unpopular. Really, otherwise, most of the concepts were favorably viewed. including the traffic calming measures, three-way stops. So taking that as one criterion for in this evaluation, we also looked at costing these interventions. We presented some high-level Class D estimates of what the cost might be, and an initial sort of stab at what the time frame might be. And these would be looking at short to medium and long-term interventions. When exactly they would be, or they should be put in place, that ultimately is up to you as council. In terms of what you feel the next step forward would be, which of these concepts and interventions you see as most easily implementable, considering costs and budgetary constraints over the short term, and which of these might be most easily approved or liked by the public. So that this concludes my presentation of the plan. And if you have any questions or require any clarifications, please don't hesitate.
Thank you, Nicholas. Council, questions, comments? Councillor Carver, please.
Yes, thank you. I have a couple of questions about the status of Main Street and Edgewater as well, both of which are provincial highways. I had understood that the idea of putting stop signs or crosswalks on provincial highways was not looked upon very favorably. So I'd just like to have some clarity or clarification on that.
That would require consultation with the province, yes. As they own the road, they would have to consent to that and provide their approval, subject to either additional case-by-case study or more detailed design of the proposal.
So what kind of precedents are there for creating stops on a provincial highway within a town and crosswalks?
They exist. I would have to get back to you with specific locations, but they do occur through the town bringing the proposal to the province, to the ministry, and making the case for that stop.
And I could just add, just to Councillor Carver to that point, I've certainly gone through that process and added stops to a provincial highway. So they're quite willing to work with the community if it's supported by public process like we have here.
Thank you.
Councillor Feeney.
Manuel, thank you for the presentation. I just had a question about one of your last slides that talked about the popularity of some of the individual ideas. And I just want to have a kind of a better appreciation for the sample size. I know you had 40, 50 people come to the community meeting. I'm just wondering, when I look at that distribution of the evaluation, like what kind of N are you using for the population?
This came straight from the 89 email responses we received as a result of consultation number 2.
Fair enough.
And on the graph here, if you see it, that's just the numbers of occurrences of agree, disagree, and so on. So they don't total up to 89. Not everyone commented on all concepts.
Mm-hmm.
Good, thank you.
Clerk?
I'd just like to comment, as Emmanuel said, they received the emails, but those emails also included information that staff forwarded from comments we had on Facebook and that sort of thing. We had staff continually forwarding that information as well.
Okay. Any other comments? Councillor Bain. There we go.
Yes, while traveling through the valley many times, Route 1 has many stops on it, many crossroads in Middleton and some of the other towns. So I think there probably is a precedent. I'm not really sure who owns the highway there. I know in Mahone Bay, unfortunately, we do own the highway, which might put another interesting twist in it. Speeding has always been a problem in Mahone Bay, whether it's real or perceived. But anyway, I think some of the things that could be instituted very quickly, very inexpensively to calm speeding. Certainly on Main Street. One of the things that would come out of calming on Main Street is I think something would really seriously have to be done on Kinburn. I know it was mentioned, but the possibility of low-level speed bumps or something, because we've seen the traffic pattern change a little bit because the narrow bridge we had there served a purpose of traffic calming, but now it's not there. And I think a lot of traffic now uses that street just because it's a straight run. And anyway, thank you.
The Kinburn indeed is, fortunately or unfortunately, depending on your viewpoint, is an alternative to Main Street. And if we do start slowing down or controlling speeds on Main Street, then obviously Kinburn becomes the next option, and drivers are likely to zoom through. Again, these are unimpeded straight shots, really a kilometer or more of no speeds and no speed limit or any constraint unless there's something in your way. So along those stretches really is where we would like to see something introduced. Typically we want something every 150 to 200 meters to be effective. So it can't just be the one-off. Otherwise you just have kind of slowing down, accelerating and stop and go. And that's not safe either. So we want something that continually reinforces the slowing down and being alert to the road. And signage actually works well with that as well. Be it signage alerting to a school zone or to crossings or speed limits as well.
Yeah, I know if I could just add, the Bicycle Nova Scotia view on Kinburn was that paint and signage together could potentially keep people feeling that they need to control their speed and keep an eye out without having to put any physical impediments in. But that would be the next step in terms of cost and probably effectiveness.
Mm-hmm. And in combination, they might work quite well. That on some stretches or the most, I guess the most critical one, particularly around the bend, there'd be some physical measures, geometric measures to slow down movement, whereas on other stretches, painting and signage may work.
Councillor Carver.
Thank you. Emmanuel, the concepts that you've presented, if I understand you correctly, were based on suggestions made by participants in the focus groups and the online surveys. Is that correct?
A mix. So the main suggestions or the input that came out of the consultation was that at certain locations there was a safety concern or there was inadequate crossing. So to directly respond to these questions, we presented or proposed certain interventions such as crosswalks or stop signs.
So I'm just going to flip this around. What suggestions or recommendations, if any, would CBCL have made beyond the triggers or ideas that came up from participants?
Typically, coming out of the review of the existing infrastructure and conditions, we looked at the road classifications, the road right-of-way width, and speeds and volumes. Those are some of the main things we can look at. And what we see is that while the volumes observed on roads are well within their design capacities, and there isn't a traffic issue per se or a capacity problem, when we looked at speeds, we clearly saw that they're speeding on all streets, whatever the posted speed limit. And yes, enforcement can help with that, but otherwise you need some sort of design interventions that will safely control speeds. And one of the major ones would be to break down these 1 to 2 kilometer stretches into shorter road segments that force stopping either at a stop sign or at a sign crosswalk. So these were really the main things we looked at. Secondly, looking at the narrow roads in town and really the narrow right of ways we have to work with. They don't lend themselves well to any kind of widening or introduction of additional facilities. You're just constrained by building face to building face. So that's where traffic calming comes into play. You can, if there are infiltration issues, which there seem to be, particularly on Pleasant Street being used as a main way in and out of town. Traffic calming measures such as be they speed humps or chicanes or bringing in planters to kind of narrow the road further and control access or force drivers to slow down. Those are things that we would typically recommend in such a situation. And we propose those on a number of those roads, be they conversion to one-way streets or closing part of the streets, such as we propose on Orchard. Those are the kinds of things that we would bring in regardless of the consultation. And of course, the something like the secondary boulevard or the alternative parallel route to Main Street.
Thank you.
Thank you. Anyone else? Councillor Bain? You're on mute, John. There we go.
Okay, now it says mute, so now I know it's going to work. One of the things is access to Main Street and some of our other streets, the corners. I don't know if you'd call them blind corners, but I think some bushes could be removed.
Yes.
Trees on probably town property and private property. Some of that stuff should be looked at. I think relatively inexpensive stuff that could be done that could make quite a difference to safety of cars pulling out. I can think of several intersections, and I did bring that up at the public consultation that was done at the Mahone Bay Center.
Yes, with a number of intersections, particularly Main Street and Pleasant, at Claremont as well, as coming in around a bend and then being expected to maybe not slow down for crossing pedestrians and cyclists is a difficult proposition. That's where a stop sign, actually through all three of these intersections in progression, kind of keeps vehicles slow so that while they do come around the bend and there are visibility issues, they are nonetheless traveling at slower speed, so they have more time to react. But certainly a correct point on clearing vegetation and trying to improve corners as much as possible. Not always feasible, particularly at Claremont and Main Street, the right corner there. When there are buildings in the way or there are grading issues, it's difficult to do that. But that's where a fully stopped, always stopped intersection or fully controlled intersection helps.
Okay. If I could, I had you spoke, Emmanuel, about capacity. What time of year did you do the bulk of your survey work?
The surveys were produced, I believe that the town contracted them, and pardon me, the data now, the time escapes me, but they were produced, I believe, in the fall of 2019 at most locations. Fall, winter, January, I think those were the typical dates.
Hmm.
Some earlier than that. There were some years, 2018, and there were some springtime locations as well.
Hmm.
The survey periods are consistent of what we would typically do. We want to survey definitely outside of summer and during the school year to try to capture typical travel patterns. Now closer to winter, depending on weather conditions, they may or may not have been favorable towards driving, or people stay home or they drive more. And counts were done over multiple days and sometimes at multiple times at the same location, so that overall you have a reasonably good spread, and you can be reasonably assured that you're looking at typical conditions.
Unfortunately, in Mahone Bay, from mid-June to mid-September, the capacity issue dies on the vine.
Yes.
Most folks that have concerns about the volume of traffic, the lack of parking, the danger for pedestrians is focused around that mid-June to mid-September period, when the traffic in town grows at least tenfold, likely more than that. I was rather surprised you made no suggestion around limiting truck traffic, through traffic by trucks in the town. You know, limiting the town to, I don't know, whatever it is nowadays, 3/4 ton or 1 ton, except for local delivery, that kind of thing. We do have large trucks that could go down Northwest Road, come down Fobo Road if they had to, and make a right-hand turn onto Main Street. An 18-wheeler going through town at 45 kilometers an hour is far different than somebody in their Volkswagen going through town at 45 kilometers an hour. I would have thought that the truck traffic option would be a relatively simple thing to implement. And I also noticed that there are no additional crosswalks between Main and Pleasant Street and Main and Fairmont Street. That stretch of Main Street has sidewalks, most of it on both sides, but there is a piece of sidewalk that could be built. There are shops on both sides of the road, and people are fairly regularly trying to get across the street in the middle of that block. I would like to have seen at least one, possibly 2 crosswalks in between that Main Pleasant and Main Fairmont area. And the speed on Kinburn has not proven to be as fast as we think it is. We've had the speed cameras out there, and yes, there is the odd driver who exceeds 50 kilometers an hour. There was even one at 8 o'clock in the morning or 7 o'clock in the morning that was going 100 down Kinburn. But the average speed, as on most streets in town, was right in around the 50 kilometer mark. That being said, I still like the idea of removable speed bumps, so we can have them down when the crowds are here in the summer and take them up for snow removal in the winter. Anyway.
I'll address those in order. Well, actually, starting with maybe the last ones. With regards to traffic calming in general, yes, many of these measures work well, or are definitely can be seasonal and mobile. So they can be brought in when needed. They can be removed in winter. They can be brought in to control infiltration potentially during the summer months on some streets. With Claremont Kinburn, the main concern, I think, wouldn't be necessarily under existing conditions, but should any of these interventions be implemented on Main Street and Main Street slow down, that's when Kinburn would become more attractive for driving at higher speeds. So speed control would have to be implemented on both routes to be effective. With regards to the seasonal traffic patterns, yes, we do expect quite a significant growth in traffic over those summer months. It's definitely something we've seen in other towns comparable to Mahone Bay. One of the better ways to control or manage that, short of restricting it or interdiction, is to catch visitors coming in sort of at the edge of town, at the boundary of town, and manage them there. Hence the concept of having a parking lot or some form of off-street parking up by Clearland Road, where ideally, or again conceptually, visitors would be directed to that lot during the summer. Same with tour buses, and potentially from there, some sort of shuttle service would bring them into town. I am aware of the town having put out an RFP for an electric vehicle fleet of some kind as a service. That potentially, electric or otherwise, might be brought in. That parking lot, we had shown it connected to a foot trail, a footpath behind the school, connecting then into Main Street. So things of that nature would ideally stop that influx of traffic of vehicles at the edges of town, and then you manage the people coming in. And that's where the other interventions, be they crosswalks or stop signs, come into play. With a really significant influx of people on the sidewalks, you cannot always accommodate them just because of the physical constraints on these roads. There's no room for wider sidewalks, or you can outright restrict or ban vehicles. So low speed, typically low vehicular volume, we tried to reinforce that through the concepts. With regards to trucking, they are a major issue or concern in town, complicated by the need for these trucks to access businesses and provision them. And it is quite difficult to control the kinds of trucks coming in, and even to enforce that they not pass through. They'll come in and they have deliveries to make. Sometimes some of these larger trucks will provision a number of towns between the larger ones on the routes. So it is very difficult to impose either a smaller vehicle or certain delivery windows, particularly as provincial highways feed into these Main Street and Edgewater. It is further difficult to restrict truck traffic through the town in the absence of some sort of alternative route that they can either bypass the center of town easily. So these trucks potentially coming down Route 3 and having to access any location down the coastline, if they find it that it's faster and easier to go through town than to stick to the main highway and then to Northwest Road, they will. And again, it is difficult to stop them from doing that. And enforcement then becomes a key need. Lastly, with regards to additional crosswalks between Pleasant Street and Fairmont, indeed, that is a 300 odd meter stretch that would benefit from at least one straight in the middle or at two locations. That did not fully come in as a particular need or as a very specific location through the consultation. And us having considered that by slowing things down at Pleasant Street and at Fairmont, that would engender lower speed through this segment, and it wouldn't need a crosswalk. But one can certainly be proposed at one or two locations. Have I addressed all of your comments, sir? I don't know if
Okay,
I missed
I'm on.
something.
Okay, Counselor, now you had a comment?
Yes, I'm glad the mayor brought it up because it's been on my mind with this report. Did the CBCL take into account, we have these speed signs that record a lot of data for roads and we move them around. Did CBCL look at these, the data recorded by those signs to take that into account?
We did, and we did see or look at and see confirmation of speeding on particularly the main road, Main Street and Edgewater. Those really stood out as the main spots with speeding. Most of the other streets speeds were roughly in the ballpark of posted speed limits, plus or minus, of course, with some outliers. So typically, the majority of streets were fine. It was really these two corridors that showed clear signs of speeding. Some very clear outliers and some skewing of the speed distributions towards the higher speeds beyond the speed limits.
Okay. Counselor Feeney?
Manuel, was there any contemplation about the merits of more defined parking spaces along the Main Street corridor, specifically from, kind of the bank down to Fobo Road, and, any merit potentially of like having a definitive space with a definitive parking meter that would have every space have its own, 10 feet long, to break up or to, I guess, clearly define the parking lot along Main Street. Was that given any contemplation throughout your evaluation?
We did contemplate it, yes, but we did not explore it in detail beyond relatively high level restriction of parking in the vicinity of the War Monument intersection, because primarily the number of bends and difficulty and narrowness of the road corridors there. In the particularly the commercial strip east on Main Street, parking there seems to be, at least most space allocator or accommodating of parking seem to be fully utilized. Where delineation becomes useful is primarily on parking management and enforcement of parking restrictions, and then on metering. That's not something that's necessarily come up in what we've heard in the town. Metering is a good way to restrict or control parking turnover, as well as having potentially the added benefit of being a revenue generator in some cases. But primarily the concern would be on the need to increase parking turnover. So at the locations where the expectation or the perception is that cars are parked too long on the street, this is something we might see potentially associated with some business owners where they just park out front. Parking metering with something like a 1 hour, 2 hour restrictions or higher cost becomes interesting. The difficulty with that in Mahone Bay is that there are no alternative streets, alternative parallel roads where such parking might be accommodated. So if you start restricting it or managing it on Main Street, then you have to start doing it on Pleasant. You have to start doing it on some of the local streets because parking will just move there. So then that kind of snowballs into a discussion or having to say, well, then you restrict parking on all the streets, all the little local streets. Okay, then how do you do that? Or how do you accommodate residents that have no parking spaces or they need to park out front? All right, then you bring in permitting, or so it just snowballs into quite a more in-depth discussion and planning. It is something that could be looked at should that need be flagged.
No, it's quite comforting to hear such a comprehensive answer to that question. it's pretty clear that you and your team have given that some thought. So thanks a lot for your impressions.
Pleasure.
Okay. Anyone else? No? Okay. Emmanuel, thank you for coming to speak with us tonight and to present your report. You certainly have given council lots to chew on, and you've given our citizens lots of things to think about and to talk with us about. I'm sure this is a multi-year project, and on behalf of council, thank you for bringing it to us.
Thank you, Mayor Devine. Thank you, council. Thank you, staff, for this opportunity. And we look forward to working alongside with you through this process. Thank you.
Thank you.
And I just wanted to say, Mr. Mayor, of course, for anybody watching, the council's aware of this, but we always pick up from a delegation with any decisions, especially in this case around projects that the town might wish to implement from this, from the recommendations generated on our next meeting agenda. So that will be on May 28th. There'll be an item where we will look at the recommendations of the plan and whether we will get some additional consultation on options or what we might wish to move forward with.
And would you like a motion to accept the report as having been received?
It would be in order at that time on the 28th.
Not now?
No,
Okay.
because we don't do motions on delegations.
Okay. Great stuff. All right, turn my notes over. Do we have any comments on that CBCL report, staff, before we leave it from the public?
Your worship, we do, and we've notified that the public that all questions will be addressed at the Q&A period at the end of the council meeting.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome.
Let's go to correspondence. In particular, action items. We have two items there. One is on the topic of the infrastructure charge, which is part of the budget. And the second is a tree planting community engagement event. CAO, would you like to speak to those, please?
Sure. Do you want me to put the agenda up on the screen at all? Just let me know if you do anyway. So I can speak to the first one with regards to the infrastructure charge, just in so much as to say, as we discussed this subject during our budget process, we clarified what the infrastructure charge is intended to be for. And we clarified at that time that the infrastructure charge supports all capital infrastructure in the community. So good example of that would be the transportation plan recommendations that were just discussed, including Edgewater Street and the need to protect Edgewater Street from shoreline erosion. So obviously the residents of Edgewater Street would not be alone in wanting to address that issue. In fact, there aren't a lot of residents on Edgewater Street. Of course, we know it's got the churches and other properties there, the cemetery. So infrastructure charge is intended to support all projects of infrastructure capital spending within the town, not specifically those that are fronting your property. And so it is charged to properties that are located in an unserviced area or may not have access to all of the services that the town offers. And I think that was the discussion that we had at the budget meeting last week, and people can go back and watch that video if they wish to.
Okay. Any other comments on that one? Councillor Carver?
Notwithstanding the excellent rationale that we've just heard from Mr. Hyde, I would like to make a motion that that staff make an effort to explore the possibility to bring back some information about the possibility of addressing that perceived inequity, that people not receiving sewage and or water service, if there's a way of prorating charges at all. I would be interested to know the pros and cons of looking at that specifically. So I'm making a motion to ask staff to explore that issue further.
I
Do we have a
second that
seconder?
motion.
Moved and seconded that that the staff be directed to consider the particular action, the infrastructure charge, and ways to better advise our citizens, and also whether or not there's an alternative to an across-the-board infrastructure charge. Is that what we're saying, Councillor Carver?
The latter part of that, whether there's an alternative to a flat rate.
Okay,
Yeah, we're looking, just for clarity, Councillor Carver, we would be looking at a two-tiered, the possibility of a two-tiered charge for unserviced or serviced properties, and what the options would be for council in that regard.
Thank you.
Okay.
That's exactly what I wanted to say. Thank you.
you've heard the motion. Councillor Clerk?
Can I, sorry, may I ask the CAO to repeat what he said last, please?
Sure. Yeah, so I was just saying to direct staff to examine options for a two-tiered infrastructure charge, taking into account the services available to properties.
You accept that, Councillor Carver, as your motion? Councillor O'Neill, do you accept that as the seconder?
That was my hope for the motion. Yes, thank you.
Okay. You've heard the motion. All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion's denied. Okay, let's go. Sam Battaglia? Is someone speaking to that?
Well, I'll just, I guess, let council
Seemed like
know.
a rather comprehensive suggestion.
Yeah, it's all in the letter. I just wanted to let council know that Sam had reached out to the town, as we have frequently been a supporter of coastal action and their work, looking for different sites, looking for sites that were deforested. We have excellent tree coverage in town, but she did identify a site, and it's a site that's sort of in the process of bouncing back naturally. It could certainly use some landscaping assistance there. So I would certainly not oppose this plan. I think it's a reasonable plan if the council is supportive.
Councillor Carver,
Just
a resident
it's,
tree
it's lovely.
surgeon.
It's a great project. I'm delighted to see it here having been brought to council. I wondered if there was any mileage in consulting with Talking Trees about the best possible site or sites. Does it have to be all one site, the project? I'm just putting questions out. Does it have to be one site? Could there
I
be?
can confirm that part, that's the nature of the grant, that it does need to be like one geographic. It doesn't necessarily have to be a single property, but one geographic area.
One geographic area. So I'm just wondering whether, knowing that there has been some falling trees weakened around the electricity cut in Jubilee Woods in Jubilee Park, whether that could be an alternative site to or an additional site to consider.
Imagine Sam would look at that. Yep. It didn't come up in conversation, but that may just be because the ownership. We'd have to look at where the town line to Nova Scotia Power ownership line is in Jubilee Wood.
Yeah, well, I think it's on the town property where the trees have been made more vulnerable because of the cut.
And are you suggesting that we might talk with the Talking Trees group to, measure their interest in participating in this project?
Absolutely. I think that they would be a natural group to approach, to be involved both in discussing possible sites and in participating in the, the person power of the digging.
Yeah. CAO, can we ask staff to do a follow-up with the Talking Trees group around that item?
Well, and I'm sure that Sam would be, we can do that. And I'm sure that Sam would be quite happy to have local volunteers and supporters for the project.
Okay.
The main thing she'd be looking for tonight is just the indication, and I think I'm hearing it around the table here, that the town is supportive. And then, I think there is time to explore some of these different opportunities under the idea that, overall council has expressed support for this notion. So if we could get that support tonight, then I can absolutely go
Okay.
back.
I'll make a motion that the
Councillor
town,
Carver.
oh, sorry. I'd like to make a motion that the town support this project proposed by the, or for the tree days planting.
Okay. Councillor Feeney seconds that motion. All in favor? Unanimous. Good one. More trees. Okay, let's go confirmation or correspondence information items. What is your wish, council?
Motion to receive and file, your worship.
Motion to receive and file, seconded by Councillor Bain. Anyone have, just before we go, I'm curious why MODL is sending us specific notice around the boulangerie's plan to expand. I
was
saw
my
it in the
question too.
newspaper. You know, Clerk?
Your worship, that's because we are the neighboring municipality. When we have a development agreement or something like that, we also
Yeah.
send that notification.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Carver.
Just for people who are maybe watching and might not have seen the documentation for the meeting, I think it's worth noting that we've received a letter from the Legion with support for the idea of moving the cenotaph and offering to cooperate and collaborate with the town in looking at an alternative site.
I was so happy to see that letter from the Legion, from Helen Whitehouse, and so pleased with their offer to participate. And I would suggest that they would be number one on the town's list for inviting people to participate on that. That was a good letter. Okay, motion's on the floor to receive and file. All in favor? Motion's carried. Let's staff reports to council. Nothing's going on. We're in the middle of COVID. Go ahead, CAO.
Well, we do have a few less staff reports to council on here than we have had lately, but council knows why. We've been meeting almost every night on something, and the budget in particular. So in this case, I'll put anything up as needed on the screen. I've got it here, so if you want me to just put it up and then take questions.
Mayor, I just had two questions.
Just two?
Just two tonight.
Go ahead.
Second, the third item, the soccer field and the discussions with the Mahone Bay Center. It wasn't crystal clear to me that that decision has been formalized to ask the Mahone Bay Center to manage the soccer field. So when I read it in the note tonight, it kind of implied that the decision would be made and we were just working out on the fine details. So I was just hoping for some clarification from the CAO on that point. And then I had a quick question on item 4.
Yeah, absolutely. So I think that, yeah, it's certainly not meant to imply that there is a decision forthcoming. The phrasing just around there, offer to play a role in the management of the field, and particularly with the sporting events there with the soccer league. Now that obviously, as noted there, things are not going to be normal this summer.
Yeah.
We're not going to be anticipating, at least anytime soon, a return to regular sports booking. And certainly the town would expect to, in light of the current situation, be overseeing the bookings for this summer. So, you know, while it does say redraft agreement summer of 2020, that should really be updated at this point, because although we do hope to come back with some possibilities for an agreement, things council could explore, the current situation in terms of targeting 2020 for any possible agreement is that's no longer a possibility. So thank you for calling attention to that. And I will update that to be more reflective of the current situation next time.
Fair enough. And the other item was number 4. And my question was specifically, I think I've lost track about the, oh, pardon me, maybe I'm in the wrong section, folks. Specifically, so my question's really around the timing and where we are with the temporary vendor bylaw. And I think that might have been later on in the deck, but has that bylaw been ratified yet? And I just Dylan, if you wouldn't mind indulging me on, just remind us where we are on that particular bylaw and where we are. I guess there it is, temporary bylaw and policy.
Yeah, absolutely. No, I mean, there has been some, I'm not sure if that feedback's on mine. There has been some issue with the timeline of that we'd originally anticipated for the summer. Again, with COVID, our expectations around permitting for this summer have changed. That doesn't mean that we are still proceeding with the draft of a new temporary vending policy based on the feedback that we received at the public information meeting. But the intention, certainly at this point, is that, a draft policy coming before council, allowing for some additional time for revisions or consultation. We're not, we had initially, I think, hoped to have something in the hands of vendors when they made decisions about the 2020 season. Now those decisions are going to be made, I'm sure, on the basis of following current events and COVID precautions. But we do continue to work on a draft, and that's where we are, is a draft policy development based on the considerable feedback we did receive in the planning information.
I mean, personally, I'd like to see that bylaw and the improvements that were made through the consultation process and the meeting we had with the community. I'd love to see those ratified, and I'd like to see that bylaw enforced this summer if hopefully we're in a position where vendors are able to provide their wares to the community. So I know we're kind of in unique times, but I'm hoping that will be something that would be in place by the summer. I know it's only May now, but I'm hoping that that's going to be in place in the next 2 months, let's say.
I think we'll have a policy before council in that time frame, and then it'll just be depending whether council wants to go through any additional revisions or process.
Fair enough. That was probably more appropriately said. Right. If council ratifies the changes, then that's right. Fair enough. Thanks very much, Mayor. That's all my questions.
Okay. Any others? Councillor Carver.
Under the council assignments, number 9, which has to do with the logo and the commitment by council to revisit the commitment to the use of the logo, the current logo. And in the time frame, it's marked off as January 2021. Could you just sort of clarify the details of the time frame for me, please? Thank you.
Yeah, well, that is certainly an estimate, but it's based on the direction here with regards to 2 processes that the council is planning over the coming year. One which has now been awarded, as noted there, to Upland Planning and Design. That's the municipal planning review process. The community branding public engagement component of that process, as council knows, is intended to take place over the summer. And we will be in that same time period in consultation with the Mahone Bay Tourism and Chamber of Commerce, hoping to proceed into the wayfinding project. So those things should be taking place and wrapping up in the fall, or at least wrapping up that early phase of engagement that is referenced in this direction. So our expectation for January was that that's the completion of this item. So revisiting at the end of these 2 processes, any decisions that council would make, direction the staff, additional public consultation in this regard. So reasonable expectation of completion, we put down January 2021.
So if any of us is asked by community residents what the time frame is, we can safely say that council will be considering this issue again, possibly January 21.
I think fall, winter might be the best. Yeah.
Okay, fall, winter.
Hmm.
Thank you.
Thank you,
Oh,
Councillor
I have
Carver.
more questions. I have more questions. May I?
Councillor O'Neill had one, if I could. Councillor Carver, please. Councillor O'Neill.
I was interested in the COVID-19 item. So this would be a question directed, I suppose, to the CAO to ask if they're, for the benefit of residents who may be watching, if you have, if you could just summarize what the current planning is to open up, especially the, common areas in terms of, parks and playgrounds. And I know that you're following provincial guidelines. I just thought you could clarify that. And I also wonder if you could, if the town has begun a plan for return to work, and if so, if you could provide an update on that.
Yeah, I can certainly comment on those items. With regards to the parks and facilities, public locations, as you say, we are taking the province's direction. So while the province has permitted municipal parks to reopen, there's still significant direction from the province concerning playground closures, sporting event bookings, any kind of event or assembly of larger groups. So the town has had updates to our signage in various community parks, reflective of that, indicating that while most parks are now, with the exception of playground, open for public access, they are intended for recreational access, individuals and family groups, maintaining a social distance. From here, there will eventually, I'm sure, be additional openings, both in terms of the playgrounds at some point, potentially some return to sporting field use. There is an expectation that the comfort stations on the waterfront will eventually be reopened. At the current time, the provincial state of emergency remains in place. We're following that closely. We understand that the direction of the Premier remains that people should stay close to home and limit their non-essential trips. And while we encourage residents to use those non-essential trips within the community to get down and support our local businesses, we're not at a point yet where, and this is in consultation with the Chamber as well, and direction from the province, we're not quite at a point where we are returning to full visitor service in terms of the VIC and the comfort station. So that it's also expected in the coming weeks. Decision will be taken following the lifting of the provincial emergency and direction from the province. And I guess that leads to the question about return to work. Obviously, the town office is a public location. Decisions are up to the town as to when that location returns to service and in what way. And we are working on some early return to work plans and looking at best practices from other areas, but that will be reported to council at the appropriate time. The main priority there is going to be that while we ensure that service is available to the public, that we do so in a way that stresses public safety and the safety of our staff. And we do want to just reassure council this time that staff continue to man the phones. We continue to receive regular payments from residents. Inquiries are responded to quickly. And to this point, and certainly Deputy CAO can chime in if she's heard otherwise, but I've heard no complaints about the town's continuing to handle service requests and respond to issues during the office closure. So we will be looking at safe reopening, limited reopening options, how to make sure that sanitary procedures are followed. But at the current time, we also are not feeling that there's a significant a loss of service in the short term around the office closure. I hope that answers your question.
Okay, Councillor Carver, back to you.
Thank you. Under the CAO report number 2, I'm wondering whether the town's green assets, natural assets, are part of the mapping project.
It's interesting that you brought that up. Actually, we just had, as referenced here, anticipating funding from AMP program. We've been working with the AIM network folks and our colleagues with the municipality of Chester, where Nick does our GIS work there, to kind of scope out how we're going to proceed with the projects that we applied for AMP funding for. And that group involves a number of people who are quite plugged into, I guess you could say, the asset management discourse. And we had a particular conversation at our most recent meeting regarding natural assets and some of the best practices going on around the country. And there's a lot of interest in what we may be able to do in town. At the current time, this funded work would only include a very high level condition assessment of parklands. And that condition assessment, and this is the conversation, tends to prioritize, the trail infrastructure over the trees that actually make the walk a desirable thing to do. So it's still a developing area, and I think that we have some opportunities maybe to play a bit of a pilot role in that and to engage volunteers. And certainly Lunenburg and Bridgewater, as you know, have done some interesting work there. So we continue to look at those as examples. But one of the asset classes not covered in the MAMP work would be the sort of tree by tree or natural asset by asset GIS tagging and inventory. And I think we will have ways to approach that, maybe even in the coming year, but it wasn't part of what was funded by FCM.
Thank you. It's good to hear.
Okay. Anyone else? Thank you, Mr. Hyde. Thank you, Ms. Hughes, for all that good CAO type information. Let's go on with our agenda. Next item is the staff report on the draft outdoor burning bylaw.
Your worship, we start with a public hearing report. A public hearing was held on May 12th, 2020 to receive written and verbal comments from the public on the draft amended outdoor burning bylaw given first reading by the town of Mahone Bay on April 14th, 2020. 2 written submissions were received from the public and forwarded to council in advance of the public hearing, and no additional submissions were received from the public at the public hearing. As to the report, as you say, council has received the staff report and the materials that they had at the April meeting at which it was first introduced. You'll notice an additional appendix at the end of the report, which has added a definition of open air fire. That was something that had been discussed at the April meeting, and staff were asked to address some issues with open fires. And when we discussed that, we've been looking at this from an enforcement perspective. The reason we opened up this bylaw was to address some concerns that we've received from the enforcement side. So we were looking at that and the regulatory sense. So what we've done to address the questions we received at that meeting was add a definition for open air fire. And as requested, there are highlighted areas. You can see 3.01. There's a slight change to wording now that we have that open air fire definition. And 3.04, there's also a highlighted area just where we change the wording now that we have that other definition. No person shall be permitted to operate an outdoor fire in Mahone Bay when a provincial authority issues a ban on open fires that includes Lunenburg County. And then section 4.0.2, there's another highlighted change, again, just to track through with the wording. Persons using outdoor wood burning appliances or acceptable fire pit shall be permitted to do so with the following provisions. So for council's consideration.
Council, consider. Questions?
Mayor, I noticed that in the letters to council as part of the initial meeting at 6:30, there were a number of suggestions. That was my first time this afternoon to kind of read those submissions. And I'm wondering if it might be appropriate to review those submissions, I think a little more elaborately, and then reflect upon them and maybe potentially to amend the bylaw before we move it on to the next steps.
Councillor Carver?
I would support that.
CAO, I'm sorry, Deputy CAO.
Oh, well, I would
Yeah,
jump
if-
in.
Oh,
I
I'm
was
sure, I know
just
you would.
I was just
Go
going to ask
ahead.
if I could suggest that just in consideration of Councillor Feeney's proposal, there is the simplest thing would just be to defer this item on the agenda, which would be the second reading item, and defer that to the next meeting. And then at that time, council can either proceed with second reading, or if there are substantive changes that are requested, we can make them and re-engage the hearing process.
And start with first reading again.
If there's substantive changes at
Yeah.
that time, if any changes come up that are just a kind of a typo correction or clarification, then we'll be okay with the current hearing.
Okay,
Mayor, hearing that, I'd be prepared to move that we defer this item until the council meeting of the 28th, or, at the timing that's chosen by you and the chair and the CAO.
okay. Do you have a
Second that.
seconder? Councillor Carver? Motion moved and seconded to defer this item until the next council meeting, which is the 28th of May. So new information can be reviewed and possibly included or put into the bylaw. All in favor? Opposed? Motion's carried. So we'll defer that to the 28th. Okay. What do we have next? COVID-19. Some interesting discussions going on with COVID-19. I spoke with Ramsey Duff and curious to know how it's going at the nursing home. And luckily, his organization has not had one patient affected by COVID-19 yet. There was one employee here in Mahone Bay who was in Europe in March, came home, self-isolated, was tested and tested positive about a week after they got home. So they were told to stay there. And then when it was appropriate, they were tested a second time and were negative. They waited for 2 more weeks and tested the person again negative. There will be one more test at the end of this week, early next week. And if the staff person tests negative a third time, then they will work at getting them back into the workforce. He cited the fact that they were, long before the province talked about personal exposure containment and the clothing and all of that, they were using it in their nursing homes. So they were quite pleased with the results of that. Of the 61 residents here, 16 have been tested and all tested negative. And 8 of the staff, there's 100 staff, have been tested. He commented on the fact that the development agreement is registered. They are now working on their building permits, and they're doing some the details around the drawings for the building itself, and they expect to be down in the dirt mid-August, early September. So it's coming. I talked to a number of businesses in town as well over the last couple of days, and they're concerned. If things don't start to open up soon, there are some businesses that may not be able to survive the COVID-19, although they fully understand why the province is reluctant to open it up too quickly or too soon. Spoke with the Chamber of Commerce, the chair, Jeff Phillips of the Chamber of Commerce, and his general tone is that they don't really have any financial plans yet that are doing them any great favors, because they're all involving loans, not grants. And his concern is late this year, early next year, when those loans start to come due, then some of our businesses may have some difficulty in making the grade with that. So he suggested suggested that there's a real danger of losing some retail outlets. Apart from that, the mood seems to be that the folks in town still have a lot of faith in the judgment of Dr. Strang and the Premier, and they are not willing to circumvent the restrictions that the province has in place. And they're hoping for a reasonable improvement without causing any new difficulties. But when you look at the reports today out of France and Germany and a couple of other European countries where the numbers are starting to climb again, right? Who knows what's going to happen in Mahone Bay? Any questions? Okay, as the Premier says, stay the blazes home and stay safe. Shop local. All those other cliches, but they are valid, very valid. Okay, back to our agenda. Deputy Mayor Noss.
Yes, your worship. As you notice in the package, we got another 100-page document. I won't walk you through that tonight. So at this time, your worship, I would move that council approve the 2020-21 general operating budget in the amount of $3,079,273 as presented, with tax rates unchanged at $1.25 per hundred residential and $3.16 per hundred commercial, and the infrastructure charge at $2.95 per unit.
Okay. Councillor O'Neill, I think, was the first one with her hand up to second that. On the question, CAO, did you have any comments you'd like to make about the budget?
Just on the high level here, I think council went through a good process over the past 5 meetings approximately, and they're all on YouTube. So if anybody's interested to go back and watch them now, it's all there.
Okay. Councillor Carver?
I just would like to suggest a friendly amendment, which was to include a reference to the fact that the infrastructure charge has been increased. It points out that tax rates are unchanged, and the way this phrase is structured, it implies that the infrastructure charge is unchanged. So I'm just suggesting inserting and the infrastructure charge, which has been increased to $2.95 per unit.
Okay, is that, are you making an amendment to the motion, Councillor Carver?
I'm suggesting a friendly amendment, yes, if that's
Okay,
acceptable.
do we have a seconder for that?
Second.
Councillor O'Neill is seconding it? Okay. All right. Any
Yeah,
other
I think that's
comments?
I think that's appropriate, Mayor. I mean, it clarifies the point.
Okay,
I think it also denotes the modest increase.
all right.
Is it
Anyone else?
acceptable to the mover?
Well, we vote on the amendment, and then we vote on the original motion, and that amendment either will or will not be included in it.
Oh,
Okay.
I thought that the person who moved the motion had to accept the friendly amendment.
Not if council votes for the amendment, they don't.
Yeah, I think the confusion here is just over the term friendly. So
Friendly.
typically when the amendment's proposed by Councillor Carver in this case, if the mover and seconder of the original motion consent, then that motion can be amended. If they don't consent, then we'd have to proceed to a general vote on the amendment. So I think that's.
So we don't need a vote on the amendment, Mr. CAO?
If the mover and seconder consent to amend the motion, then that makes it a friendly amendment.
Well, mover and seconder, how do you feel about that? You're okay? Seconder,
Yeah.
you're okay? All right. So the motion with the adjustment to add the comment about the fact that the infrastructure charge at $295 is an increase of $20. Right? Okay, that's the motion. All in favor?
Aye.
The motion's carried. Excellent.
Now, not to let everyone off so easy, Carl got to pick the best one, the first one, but I did send out a long
Do
list
the
of all
rest of
the
them.
motions. We typically go kind of around the circle, so if anybody wants to jump in with any of the other ones on that page, we do need to do them all.
Yeah.
Mayor, I'm happy to
Councillor
make,
Feeney.
I'm happy to move the council approve the 2020-2021 capital budget with expenditures totaling $9,228,227, supported by a projected $4,805,986 in external funding.
Do we have a seconder? Councillor Now. Moved and seconded on the question. All in favor? Motion's carried. The next one.
Mayor, I would move that council approve the 2020-21 electric utility budget in the amount of $2,161,346 as presented.
Seconded by Councillor Bain. All in favor? Motion's carried. Who'll take the next one?
Mayor, I'd move that council approve the 2020-2021 electrical utility capital budget with
Yeah.
expenditures totaling $223,000, supported by a projected $75,000 in external funding.
Second the motion.
Seconded by the deputy mayor. All in favor? Motion's carried. Councillor Carver, you look skeptical on that last one.
No, I'm not being skeptical. I want to move for the strategic plan, but I have an edit that I would like to suggest before.
Well, let's
before
just,
doing that. And
we'll
I
get
can't
to
find
the,
my,
we'll get to the cemeteries and then we'll do the strategic plan and action plan, if that makes sense.
okay, all
We'll
right.
take the
Thank
water
you.
utility and cemeteries and then we'll go back to those.
Okay,
Okay.
it's at the top of my list, so I thought, okay.
We'll make the next one.
Mayor, I'm on a roll, so I'll just proceed. I would move that council approve the 2020-2021 water utility budget in the amount of $652,781 as presented.
Seconded by Councillor Now. All in favor? Motion's carried.
Mayor,
Next.
Mayor, I
Yes,
would move,
Councillor O'Neill?
I would move that council approve the 2020-2021 water utility capital budget with expenditures totaling $3,325,056, supported by a projected $2,340,000, $2,340,035 in external funding.
Okay. It's moved. Do we have a seconder? Deputy Mayor, moved and seconded. All in favor? Motion's carried. Next.
Mayor, I would move that council approve the 2020-2021 cemetery budget in the amount of $22,250 for Park Cemetery and $10,300 for Bayview Cemetery as presented.
Seconded by Councillor Bain. All in favor? Motion's carried.
And
Next
then to
one.
Councillor Carver's point, we can go back up to the top and thank you for coming back to those. Those might require, as you say, some correction or amendment. So if you want me to put anything up on the screen, let me know.
Yes, I have to find my notes. Under the facilities management section of the strategic plan, I can't find my copy over here, so if you could show yours, I would appreciate it.
Are you seeing the
I
plan?
see we see the
No.
map, the front page.
Okay, great. Okay.
So just the facilities management section. Oh, it could be in the action plan.
Yeah, I guess you must be looking at the action plan. I don't know if I can switch here. Let me know. Do you guys see
Yep.
the action plan? Okay.
Can you make
great.
it larger? I can't read that.
Yes, I can.
Okay, so what I'm suggesting is that because if you look at the box below it, the asset management, the specific actions are broken up into separate items and the responsibilities are assigned separately. So I'm just suggesting that for facilities management, those responsible would be council and staff. So council gives the direction, makes the decision and gives the direction, and then it's staff that carries out the management part of it. Because council isn't responsible for all of that, everything that it says in the yellow box.
Yeah, if others agree, it's an easy change. So what we do is we've been just getting kind of a show of hands around the proposed changes, and then we can do a motion to accept this as amended, if that works for everybody.
Fine with me.
I'm not sure if the wording, council makes decisions and authorizes staff to prepare RFPs. That's what council's responsible for in that item, to make the decision and to authorize staff to prepare the RFP.
And in which case I would suggest that it be split up into separate boxes. Council makes the decision and authorizes staff. The next box would be staff prepares the RFPs.
I'm inclined to agree with you, Councillor Carver, if we're going to make that point, that we would split that box into two and separate the two responsibilities.
If I could just add there, I think, in terms of staff issuing an RFP, if council directs us to do it, we're doing it. I think if you wanted to add another box, it would probably be, a more substantive thing to just add another box that's actually staff oversees construction of facilities, in accordance with council award of contract or something, more general, picking up from the award of contract rather than splitting the process of the RFP from the award of RFP.
Yeah.
And so if we do say that staff oversees the contract following the award by council, then the timeline for that new one would be quarters 1 through 4 of 2021. Sorry.
That would satisfy my concern, or what I felt was missing there.
Okay. Councillor Now.
Yeah, just depends on what you mean by oversee the construction. Because I don't think staff really has the ability to oversee the actual construction of something.
I think what we probably
seeing that gets done.
It's a good point, Richard. I think what we'd probably do is keep it very high level. So my suggestion for the text, I was just writing something here, would be council oversees award and execution of contracts. Or council award, okay, sorry, staff, council awards contract, staff oversees execution of contract, or staff oversees execution of contract following award by council.
Yeah, that sounds better.
Yeah, that works for me.
Anyone else? Okay. We'll make that change, Mr. CAO.
Yeah, that sounds good. I've written it as, so the new bullet would be staff oversees execution of contract, and then an S in bracket following award by council. And it'll go down as a new second action under the facilities general heading, with a timeline for quarters 1 through 3 or 1 through 4 of this current fiscal. Just want to make
Okay.
sure everybody's clear, because we're hoping to do the approve as amended here, rather than my writing that up in the next package.
Deputy Mayor? Okay. Councillor Carter.
Yeah, I'm prepared to make a motion that council approve the amended 2018 to 2020 or 2021
2021.
strategic plan as presented. 2018 to 2021.
I think it's
As
the
amended.
action plan, actually.
Oh,
But
we're
I
on the
think
action
she's,
plan.
I think she's intentionally, well, maybe you're not intentionally. I think you were doing the strategic plan as presented, and then the next motion would be the action plan as amended. Is that what you were
There
going to
we
do?
go.
Okay.
That was my thought.
So you're making a motion that we approve the strategic plan as presented.
Yes.
Do we have a seconder? Seconded by Councillor Feeney. All in favor? Okay, and now you're making a motion to approve the action plan as amended.
I would be delighted to move that council approve the amended 2018 to 2021 action plan as amended.
Okay. Seconded by Councillor O'Neill. All in favor? Motion's carried. What's next?
Yes, thanks, everyone. That was a lot of motions, and thanks, Mo, for capturing all those movers and seconders in the minutes.
Okay, that's good. We are now down to committee reports. You have the committee reports that were included in your package. Does anyone have any questions? Okay.
Could I just-
Councillor Carver, I have one question, if I might.
Oh, yes, please. Mhm.
The Lunenburg County Senior Safety Monthly Report. How many people in Mahone Bay are reflected in that report? Or do we know that?
Oh, we usually do know, and usually we have a pie chart and with statistics in it. I think everything is kind of off a little bit right now because of the COVID situation.
COVID thing?
But I can ask and definitely get you that information.
Maybe you can send us that in an email, Councillor Carver.
I will definitely do that. I will do that.
Thank you.
And just to clarify, they have now received 2 batches of $10,000 from the provincial government to address seniors issues, senior safety issues in the county. And I think I've mentioned before that they have used that money to hire additional staff. So the additional staff helps them track all their previous clients and address all the new referrals that they're getting, which are pretty complicated. A lot of them have to do with housing. So they've had 34 referrals in the past month. So
Is that an increase of 34?
well, they've had 34 in the past month, so that's high.
Okay. And what about United Way? Did they not get some funding from?
They did get some funding from United Way. They got some funding that is helping them prepare what they're calling isolation packages. So they're delivering them to, they started with 25, but they're working up to 50 or more. And they're packages that include some small treats, things like toilet paper, hand sanitizer, masks, information about contacting information, even a book from the library that's been contributed by the library. So, and they've had a lot of really good feedback that people appreciated the outreach and the just the feeling of being remembered. They've also been collaborating on the meals that are being prepared by Souls Harbor and delivered. Oh, I can't remember who's delivering them now. But that's a really
It's
project.
Energized Bridgewater is delivering them.
There you are. We should know that. Yeah.
Okay. All right.
So there's a lot
Thank you,
going.
Councillor Carver.
Welcome.
Any other questions? All right. New business. You're mute, Penny.
Police
There you
Advisory
go.
Board. Have you? Oh, that's it. We've done them.
Well, that's one of the reports. I don't think, does anybody have any questions? Okay.
Nope. Okay.
So
All right, new
that's new
business.
business and that's over to you.
Okay, so I am giving a notice of motion about the town council policy. So I will make a motion at the next meeting, May 28th, about some points in the policy that I would think could be added or tweaked.
Which policy, Councillor Carver?
Town council policy.
Oh, that one. Okay. All right. Okay. All right. Councillor Carver has a motion and motion on the floor for the 28th. And you'll have that motion worded to staff to be able to go into the council packages the requisite 5 days before.
That actually is one of the things that's not specified in the policy. So that I'm going to bring to the table on May 28th.
Okay, good. Thank you. Anything else? We've reached the end of our agenda. Councillor Bain. No, not yet, John. There.
There we are. Yeah, just a comment on the budget process. Having been through quite a few of them over the last number of years, I think this was pretty painful, very well organized. And I think staff did a great job of the presentation in general, and then the total cooperation with council and appropriate discussions. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Bain. Well-deserved accolades, if you'll excuse the word, to the staff, to the CAO, and certainly to the finance manager in producing that documentation. It made the job much easier. Didn't quite hurt as much, I don't think. CAO, you'll be preparing a news release to the press on the budget?
Yes, and actually, thanks for bringing that up. We did circulate that, so that will be going out with the budget version that it was approved tonight. We should have it tomorrow for the website and everything. But just in case there were any suggestions for any small amendments to that budget press release, we would have the opportunity to do that. Anybody have any suggestions in that regard? I know there was at least some raised to me by email.
Mayor, just for everybody's benefit, I did send an email noting 2 items that I thought might be worthy of edits. One was just, I think building upon Councillor Carver's note around the infrastructure fund. So I made a note on that point, just to expand upon the $20 increase and denote it inside the release. And the other item was about whether council was in a position to highlight the solar garden project specifically in the press release. And if council felt comfortable with kind of giving that on, full-throated support for the project within the release before I think we've really had a chance to fully vet it. I know it's certainly denoted in the overall capital program with a placeholder, but I think there's still a lot of road to travel before I think that final decision gets made.
And if I could just comment on that, I think because it does say establishment of a community solar garden, small change to that wording that I might suggest, I think would accommodate that and still be in the spirit of what council is supporting, would be just to say, and renewable energy generation. So the work then, we're continuing to work towards renewable energy generation rather than saying that specifically the establishment of a community solar garden in 2021. So that just leaves us a little bit more open-ended in terms of how we pursue that. Obviously, the council's still very inclined to pursue that, but without making a commitment to a project breaking ground this year. So I think that change, I can certainly make that change. And the other change Councillor Feeney noted is an easy one. And we just clarified the very motion approving the budget to reflect that it was an increase from 275 to 295 for the infrastructure charge. And that was the proposed change here, was just to cite that it was an increase from 275 to 295, I believe.
Okay.
Mayor, one other just last comment. I note that the bylaw for the infrastructure fund is officially called the Capital Infrastructure Fund, I believe. And I didn't know if that was just a colloquialism or if that's actually the formal term for the fund. But I do think, given recent correspondence from the community, that anytime we have the opportunity to reiterate that those funds, and I think the CAO has made that point well a few times in a few public meetings that have been streamed live on YouTube, is that whenever we can use the term capital infrastructure fee or capital infrastructure fund, I think it's well worth our while to do that.
reinforcing that whole capital
Hmm.
notion around the funding. Yeah, good one. Okay, anyone else? Now, should we adjourn the meeting, CAO, and then ask for the public's input?
Yeah, that would be the procedure now. Obviously, in order
Okay.
to be here so the public can see us, we'll adjourn the meeting, but Kelly doesn't stop the YouTube.
No, it keeps
process.
going.
Yeah.
Entertain a motion to adjourn. Moved
Move
by
that we
Councillor
adjourn.
Carver. Seconded by Councillor Now. I haven't got a hammer. Deputy Mayor, do you have a comment?
I just need to step outside for a minute, your worship.
Okay. Anyone else need to take 5 for water break or whatever? Okay, we are adjourned. Let's go to the comments of the public.
Your worship, we have a question. It came in during the presentation of the draft transportation plan from the
Yep.
gentleman from CBCL. The question is, are there any statistics of how many car accidents have been in Mahone Bay due to speeding? Also, how many people have been hit by cars in Mahone Bay?
We'll have to wait till the deputy mayor comes back. He's got the longest memory. CAO, do you have an answer?
Yeah, well, Carl probably will be more useful in terms of the colloquial information. I haven't been back in town all that long, but I think what this question is getting at is, do we track reports? Do we have reports to that effect? We don't track those reports, but the RCMP does. They do provide us regularly. It was even on the agenda tonight with quarterly updates on statistics. Quite a lot of different types of traffic violations, but at least in my memory, only one pedestrian has been struck by a motor vehicle. And, I wouldn't want to put words in the police's mouths, but I don't believe that they specifically cited speeding as an issue there. Although it is one of the locations where mid-block crossing has been proposed by CBCL.
How long ago was that, Dylan?
That was just last year.
Is that the young lady that walked into a car? She wasn't hit by the car, she hit the car.
That sounds
Anyway.
like when you report a deer accident to your insurance. You didn't hit the deer. The deer
You
hit you.
jumped right out in front of me. Councillor Now.
I really can't say for sure, but I don't recall any accidents really that were involved from speeding. Not to my memory. There's been a few accidents, but not even all that many of them. And like the CAO said, the one pedestrian accident is the only one I can remember occurring in Mahone Bay.
Okay, thank you. See, Deputy Clerk, Deputy CAO, Town Clerk.
Your worship, not specifically to this question, but when we were looking at the idea of bringing crosswalk flags into Mahone Bay a couple of years ago, in my role as liaison with the RCMP, I did have a lot of discussions with them about pedestrian versus vehicle, that sort of thing. And we can certainly ask if they have any more information. But I know at that time, it was felt it's a very difficult thing to answer because who knows what happened just before the accident, but also it comes down to what is actually proven in the end. This person says this person says this. What actually happens to the file is what is reflected in the records. So that's been my discovery in dealing with the RCMP in this question.
Deputy Mayor, we're dealing with a question from a citizen.
Yep.
And it flows out of the traffic study presentation tonight, and they're asking whether or not there is any information or records of an accident having occurred in Mahone Bay due to speed.
Okay.
Can you recall any?
No, I can't recall any, your worship.
Okay, thank you. CAO, do you have a?
Just a quick final note, no additional statistics there, but just because I assume this question speaks to the motivations for some of the recommendations from CBCL. And I will note that, the town is often approached and has been in the past couple of years here with concerns around safety, and often those concerns, especially from parents, are not necessarily of accidents that have happened, but of behaviors that are not supportable until improvements are made to avoid future accidents from happening. So we often
It's
hear,
too late once.
yeah, I won't let my children bicycle in this area or cross the street here without
Yeah.
supervision. And, thankfully the parents are making those choices. So we're not having, possibly having accidents. But in the meantime, what we're being requested to do is make improvements that allow people to make those choices without fear of possibly having an accident
And I think we're also looking at making improvements that will be valid in 5 years' time, in 10 years' time, in 15 years' time, and we're not constantly playing catch up. As our town continues to develop and grow, and we get more families coming in and more children in the town, then we're going to make a change. And then a couple of years later, we'll make another change. I think one of the things about this study is it's causing us to look forward. Councillor Bain, did you have your?
Yeah, I think we should be proactive and not reactive in this situation.
Okay, thank you. Other questions?
No, your worship, those are all the questions.
That was the only question.
There
Okay.
is a lot of comment back and forth, but there were no questions.
Comments back and forth between whom?
We do receive comments. People comment as they go through. There was a question, what does MAMP stand for? Kelly can answer that in the
Sure.
background. Yeah,
Yeah.
but we do have
okay.
people participating this evening, yes.
So do we have any way of seeing what that chatter was like while the meeting is going on? Is it recorded anywhere?
Interestingly, it actually is part of the permanent meeting record. If you're really interested, if you follow our meetings on YouTube, the comments appear as they were posted. So you'll actually see when those comments were posted or a response was received
As you
the
watch
meeting,
through
as you
the,
watch. Yeah.
okay, I haven't noticed that yet, but okay, good news.
May I
Councillor
ask a
O'Neill.
question? Is there any way to the mayor's point that we could get those comments without having to watch the entire meeting?
Apparently not, Councillor O'Neill.
Just the summary of them that we get here. Yes. So you'll have to join
Okay.
and watch the meeting like everybody else.
Good show. Well, it's 9 o'clock and we are adjourned and we have no more commentaries and our budget has been approved. And après-moi le deluge, now we'll just wait to see what everybody has to say about it. Okay?
Excellent.
All right. Good night, everyone.
Right,
Good night.
See ya.
good night.
Right, stay safe, everyone.
See you later.
Thank you, Dylan. And Maureen. And Kelly, wherever you are.
Well, thanks to all the staff.
The council meeting is now concluded. That's good.
Bingo.